everybody. Welcome back to our deep dive on all things marketing for the game industry. Next up, we have my good friend and business associate, Michael Brown, the CEO of Vicarious PR, who specifically requested a very fancy introduction that he's not going to get because it's me. But he's going to be going over something that is absolutely near and dear to all of our hearts, the marketing secrets of Steam NextFest. So, Michael, floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be going over NextFest, and basically the objective is to get the maximum return from your Steam NextFest event. So we'll be looking at proven strategies, good tactics and tips, and things that you need to essentially consider when doing your one and only NextFest. So a little bit about me. I'm Michael. I am the founder and general goblin potion maker at Vicarious. Vicarious is a marketing agency that's been around for almost 10 years now. We've done everything from indie titles to AAA games and kind of everything in between. We've launched over 200 titles. NextFest in particular is close and dear to me because ever since NextFest started, we have been very strong on analyzing the data and how the algorithm works for Steam and trying to get our games the best possible visibility during the NextFest. And so by doing that, we've managed to achieve at least one title in the top 10 games on NextFest, front page placements every single NextFest since it started. We last year generated over 3 million wish lists for our clients, and currently we have 5 games in the top 100 globally wishlisted games. So that's a little bit about my background and why you should probably at least consider what I have to say. But yeah, essentially what we're going to be doing today is looking at what is Steam NextFest, choosing the right NextFest for you, dependent on where you are in development and what the goal is and what you're looking to achieve. Also looking at what you should be doing before the festival, what you should be doing during the festival. We're going to be looking at strategies for influencers and media. We're looking at advertising. We're going to be looking at what you should be doing post NextFest and things that you should be doing to essentially keep the momentum going, and then some common pitfalls and key takeaways, and then we'll take questions and talk about specific case studies if you want to, if there's time at the end. I would like to say that I've timed this out quite nicely to like 45 minutes, but I haven't. So it will either be very quick or very long, and probably not too much in the way of in between. So getting started. So what is Steam NextFest? So NextFest is obviously, for those of you who don't know, NextFest is essentially a Steam run festival that prioritizes game discoverability. So it's all about demos and looking at what's coming up on Steam. For those of you who do know what NextFest is, obviously it's fairly self-explanatory and you already know. A couple of things that are important to note on NextFest. When NextFest began, you actually could enter multiple. You can no longer do that. You only have one. And so choosing which one is incredibly important. 2023's NextFest, I think it was clocked in at somewhere along the lines of like 11 million viewers, unique visitors, went onto the actual main NextFest page. So it is a big deal and it's a big marketing beat and has become essentially a premium digital event every 3 months or so, because there's 3 a year at this point. So you have your February, your June, and your October NextFest. What's more important is why you should participate in it. So it's a chance to use Steam as a visibility tool, for one matter of fact. 2 is that it is a great way to build audience, build community. It's also a great way to get feedback on your game early. It's a great way to generate a lot of wish lists. And the key factor in that is that people are going to NextFest to try games. They're looking, in terms of marketing, we call it high intent. So their intent is high to actually try something new and find new games to look at. And so it's a great way to capture potential players, both in terms of wish lists and, in terms of things like Discord, as well as forums and things like that. And historically, what we've seen pretty much across the board here is that it can be a particularly good tool to really boost momentum right before an indie game launch. So we've seen varying statistics, but on average, several 100% better wishlist conversion across the board when it comes to launching an indie game right after, within a certain time period, right after a NextFest. And so it can be almost utilized as a flagship tool as a part of a launch strategy. So it is really important to make sure that you do participate and utilize, what is a free event to your advantage when you're looking at your launch strategy. So choosing the right fest, there's a lot of times where I speak to developers and studios who did not choose the right fest and chose a festival when participated in the NextFest too early. There's essentially two options here. So it really depends on how you view NextFest and how you want to utilize it. Option A is essentially using NextFest as a marketing beat in and of itself, but not as part of your launch strategy. So you essentially align your beat, you align NextFest to whatever stage in development you're at. So you could use it as like early demo feedback. You could use it as like a visibility push towards the end of the year, especially if you're launching in like a January period. The other option, which is my preferred option, is the option that I recommend for the majority of cases, especially indies, is that you use it as a catalyst to launch, to help launch your game. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's backed by data, but it really helps in terms of improving the algorithm on Steam, especially post-Fest, for your launch, because the wishlist velocity that NextFest can drive for you really does impact how Steam's algorithm views your game. And so if you have a very, very good NextFest and you drive a lot of traffic to the store page, your conversion looks good, your wishlist numbers are, really ramping up, then those are weighted against how valuable the game is perceived to be on Steam. And so using that to then launch your game, post NextFest, those wish lists that are gained within that time period are kind of worth more to the algorithm. And so that is my recommended option. And I would, you've got to take it on a situational basis, depending on, genre and what your timeline is and what kind of game you're doing and if you're launching in early access or not. But, generally speaking, my advice is to use it as part of your launch strategy to capitalize on the momentum gains to then go and have a successful launch. So before we get into the actual week, the festival week itself, let's talk a little bit about pre-fest. So one of the things that I often see, especially with indies who are doing DIY marketing, is that they are often starting their, let's say, call it a NextFest campaign, too late. Your NextFest campaign doesn't start on the day of NextFest. Your NextFest campaign starts probably 3 to 6 months before the NextFest begins. So there's a couple of key points that you really want to hit here during the kind of planning and preparation phase. So the first one is your demo. It is incredibly important, and I can't stress this enough. It is incredibly important to have a very polished, representative, playable demo. Ideally, if you're planning on having Steam Deck support. Make sure that it is Steam Deck optimized so it runs well, and really just QA the ever-loving crap out of that demo. It has to be the best first impression that you can make it. Make sure that you also have optimized your store page. So you've got updated store page assets. You have, a new trailer. Your screenshots look great. The text is updated. You've got your localizations in place. First impressions really do matter on the store page, and especially when you consider the kind of flow of the average player on NextFest, where they're going to hit that main page. The first thing they're going to see is the header. And they're going to, more than likely, they're going to see the game's, the actual capsule image, and then they're going to click on it. And the first thing that they're going to see is the trailer run and, the short description, and then possibly, depending on their screen size, some of the long description. It's really, really important that you capture their attention very, very quickly and you really pull them in. So making sure that that store page looks like the best it can possibly be is ridiculously important to make sure that conversion goes well when they're actually on the page. And another thing to prepare is obviously the trailer itself. So having a dedicated trailer for NextFest is always highly recommended, making sure that it's the best trailer that it can be, that it flows really well, captures attention, is high impact, and having your press kit ready. So that's everything from key art, assets, fact sheet, demo instructions. A lot of people forget this part. So when you're doing outreach, which we'll come on to in a minute, especially to press and influencers, sometimes they might not go about reading too much on the Steam page, or, they might give it a quick cursory glance. It really often helps, especially if you're doing outreach via email or, on social to an influencer or a member of the press, to include demo instructions in the press kit, both in terms of how to access the demo and also instructions on how to play the game, because don't assume that people will just pick it up intuitively. Hopefully they do, and hopefully it's designed so that they do, but never assume that, and always include demo instructions in that press kit just in case. And also, I always recommend having influencer specific assets included in your press kit. So that's everything from like character cutouts to backgrounds, all of those kind of things. Make sure that you're giving the tools needed for influencers to create those thumbnails, because it's incredibly important to them. So make sure all of that stuff is included. Be really prepared here. So, 3 to 6 months preparation is critical. Making sure that you've got everything in place months in advance is going to be massively beneficial, and it will make the actual campaign much smoother and ultimately less stressful for you, especially if you're doing it with either solo or a small team, and you're doing DIY and you don't have an agency or you don't have a dedicated marketing person. Preparation is key on that one. So continuing before the festival, the demo itself is obviously going to be paramount. This is the thing that press will play, influencers will play, and players themselves will play. It is incredibly important that the hook of the game is present within the demo. The demo itself has to grab the player within the first few minutes. If you load up a demo and the game is kind of average or kind of meh within the first kind of 3 to 5 minutes, the likelihood is they'll move on, they'll stop, they'll close out the game, and they'll move on to the next demo. Doesn't matter what the genre is, it's incredibly important that those first few minutes of the gameplay experience, even whether it's a tutorial or it's narrative based, it has to really hook people in. So it's worth spending the time to really plan that out and making sure that you grab those people inherently within the first couple of minutes. A tactic I also recommend as well, and this is something that you have to prepare in advance, and this is somewhat situational dependent, but depending on the game that you're making, have an updated version of the demo that you can actually launch mid-fest or post-fest with new content. Now, one of the reasons this works really well is because it adds value and it also builds relationships and it adds a lot of positive to perception to you as developers. So let's say you launch your demo before the next fest begins, people are playing it, content's coming out, players are really enjoying it. And then in the middle of the next fest, you drop a blog post and say, hey, we've updated the demo and we've added in 2 extra levels, or we've added in a new character, or we've added in, X, Y, and Z. It's just a really good look and it just plays really well across the board. It makes it look like that you care, that you're taking feedback, that you're, excited to give the customer more. And so it's a really good tactic to do that if that's something that you can do. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like big pieces of content, although if you can, then all the better. But adding value in the middle of NextFest or post NextFest is really worthwhile. And again, QA, I cannot stress this enough. There's nothing that kills momentum like a buggy demo. It's just the worst possible look. You want it to be smooth. You want it, the performance has to be good across different hardware. If you're doing Steam Deck support, make sure it runs well and it's optimized for Steam Deck as much as possible. Think about controller support. Think about controls in general. So make sure that you've not only QA'd but maybe focus tested things like the tutorial, the controls themselves. Are they intuitive? Do people pick them up easy? Is it something that feels good to play? Accessibility as well, something that is often overlooked. Things like colorblind, making sure that there are options for accessibility there as well. All adds to the positivity on the demo itself. So, but I cannot stress this enough. Just QA it and QA it until you're absolutely sick of that demo, because it has to be incredibly smooth and feel really good to play. The store page itself, again, it has to be high impact. Make sure that your USPs are present and clear. User-friendly descriptions are really going to be important. The store page should be really strong on visuals, and it should be very clear, and it should flow really well. I always recommend having a very strong header with a really good logo, having screenshots that are visually impressive, that are very clear. When it comes to screenshots, the kind of litmus test is always like, if I don't know anything about the game, can I understand what's going on within that single screenshot if it's taken out of context? And if I can, then it's a good screenshot, because that's what needs to happen, because you've got to assume that people don't understand anything about the game. And so that screenshot has to be very clear. Also, something that is worth setting up pre-NextFest as well is setting yourself up success when it comes to actually engaging with demo players. So make sure your Steam forums are set up in the way that you want them. Make sure you have a bug report thread. Make sure you have feedback thread, suggestions, all of those kind of things, and just use the tools that Steam gives you in order to communicate with players effectively. And it's a really good look for a developer to be in the forums and replying to messages, replying to feedback, even if it's feedback that isn't useful or you don't agree with. Let's say someone complains about the balance of a particular fight or something like that. Even if they're they might be wrong, it's worth engaging with them and turning that potential player into a long-time fan of the game. So use the tools available for that. When it comes to the Steam page as well, it's important to bear in mind here that statistically speaking, what average is about 3 to 5 seconds before people lose interest once they go onto a Steam page. So you basically have essentially 5 seconds to ensure that you capture their attention. So I would take that and apply that to both the trailer that is first displayed upon the store page, but also within the kind of bounds of the long description and short description and the capsule, making sure that they grab the attention, are clear, they display the unique hook of the game, and try to make it as visually impressive and enticing as possible, can only, be to the benefit. Next, be media friendly. So one of the things that oftentimes people don't do or don't consider is how to be media friendly. So press kits are a really important way to do this. So make sure that the press kit is accessible from the your website, and make sure your website is very clearly displayed in the links on the store page. You can even have a Steam forum post that's locked and pinned, where it's like, hey, here's the website, here's the press kit, all of those kind of things. Make sure that the press kit's asset heavy, so make sure everything that's possibly can go in that press kit is in there. Make sure that your fact sheet is up to date. Make sure that the USPs are clearly displayed in that fact sheet, and really go the extra mile to make sure that the press kit is as complete and thoughtful as possible. So influencer assets, so that we can make thumbnails, maybe even an FAQ. So for if you know that there's going to be frequently asked questions, let's say you're doing an RPG, or you want, maybe you're doing a creature collector game, something like that, and that there's going to be questions on like game length or particular features, that kind of thing. Put an FAQ into your press kit as well. The idea is that you're doing the work for them and really greasing the wheel, so making it super easy for both press and influencers to create content, and they don't have to go looking for things, they don't have to ask a bunch of questions. It's all provided for them, and by doing that, massively increases your chances of getting covered, because the easier it is for them to get what they need, the less time it takes them, the more likely it is that they're going to get up an article or a video, because it's quick and easy for them. Next is kind of really, really super important. NextFest starts before NextFest. So you should be starting your campaign before. Usually I would recommend 1 to 2 weeks before the NextFest actually begins. Sometimes more, depending on what you're looking to achieve and the kind of KPIs that you're aiming towards. But momentum before the NextFest really matters. Now, traditionally, NextFest changes kind of every single time, and Valve are always messing with the algorithm and the way that they present the games. And if you've seen and if you're NextFest at this point, you'll know that like the last NextFest was very visually different from the one before. And we as marketers are always trying to figure out exactly what they're doing with the algorithm, why certain games are placed, front page versus, aren't featured at all. It used to be that wishlist velocity in the days prior to the NextFest kind of determined your placement when it comes to the rankings on the first page. That changed a couple of NextFests ago. So they started messing around with day one velocity. So how many wishlists you got on the first day mattered more than your wishlist velocity. And then the last NextFest, it was kind of a combination of both. So don't leave anything to chance here. My recommendation is that all of your wishlist traffic and conversions matter both prior to the NextFest and the day one. So traditionally what we've done for a lot of our titles is we've done campaigns where we're getting coverage from press and influencers, and about a week before, we're outreaching several weeks in advance of NextFest. We're actually launching the demo several days, sometimes in advance of the NextFest, so that people are actively playing it. And the goal being is that by the time that you get to day one, you already have significant numbers of players playing the demo. You already have consistent traffic and wish lists coming in from external sources. And then we actually plan day one content to go live as well. So we're doing, we might, have some influencers or a particular article from like PC Gamer or something like that go live on day one. So that really boosts the day one traffic as well. And so we're combining both momentum running up and then day one to effectively try and push the algorithm so that our placement in the rankings puts us so that we can try and get a feature spot on the front page. It really does matter, your placements on the front page, and I can't stress that enough. So you're not talking like a minor difference here. You're talking the difference between tens of thousands of wish lists versus a couple of thousands of wish lists. Being able to get on the front page in any form, whether it's on trending upcoming, whether it's on top played demos, is a huge visibility boost. And it drastically changes how many people see and how many people wishlist the game. And it also drastically changes the actual perception of the game, because obviously if someone sees it on the front page, that means that they assume that other people find that game popular. And so they're more than likely going to be drawn to it inherently, because it's almost like a social proof. So trying to aim for those top spots is very, very important. So doing different tactics and doing everything that you can to try and reach that is very, very, very worthwhile. But the downside is that NextFest has been very, very successful for a lot of games, and so competition is inherently very, very high. And that means that everybody's vying for the attention of influencers, everybody's vying for the attention of press, everybody's vying for the attention of consumers, including big budget titles. So it's not easy and it is competitive, but it is also achievable. So like I mentioned, launch your demo early. Make it its own marketing beat. So don't necessarily have to tie it to NextFest itself, but let's say you launch your demo 4 days in advance of NextFest. Make sure that you prepare it as you would, announcing a release date. Use a multi-channel approach, post it out on socials, make a press release for it, send it to press, do outreach to influencers and press to play the demo, and track the numbers. When you're starting to get those pieces of coverage coming in, track the numbers, look for your baseline on wish lists, how much traffic is coming from external sources, what the conversion rate looks like on wish lists, because then you'll be able to kind of benchmark your performance as well and compare it throughout NextFest, and be able to kind of see clearly where traffic is coming from. Are people enjoying the demo? Are the numbers playing well in terms of traffic versus wish lists, all of those kind of things, and it gives you a chance to make changes as needed before the actual event begins. In terms of press themselves, so press preview is going to be pretty important. Now, there are a couple of hurdles here. So the press as a whole are still very relevant in general, but obviously there's a lot less journalists than there used to be, and journalism as a whole is facing tough times. So reaching out early and offering exclusive access to a title is going to be very, very important. Usually right now we're talking about 2 to 3 weeks worth of lead time, because there are, journalists in general are getting hundreds of requests a day. They're getting slammed by email. So one of the tactics that we often use is we will generate Steam keys for a demo before the demo's live. We'll give press Steam keys with an embargo, and we'll say, hey, you're getting exclusive access to this before this goes live on this day. So feel free to play it, and you can post on the day that it goes live, or, whatever it may be. When you're outreaching to press, bear in mind that they are slammed and bandwidth is limited. Don't spam journalists. And if you are going to follow up, let's say you email a journalist and then you don't hear from them, it's okay to follow up, but don't spam or pester. My golden rule is if you don't hear twice, then a third is not nice, which means email them twice, and if they don't respond, move on. It means either that it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily interested, but they might just not be able to get to it. So try not to damage those relationships in that sense. Articles can drive traffic and wish lists at critical times. there's been a lot of talk in the indie community over the years about, are press still relevant? Because obviously influencers do drive a lot of traffic. Influencers are, I would say, the better medium for getting players to actually judge a game based on, because obviously they can just go watch the game itself, right? But we tend to find that actually articles can drive a lot of traffic and wish lists at critical times, but it depends on what type of content it is. We actually had a game last year that we had an article in PC Gamer to announce the demo launch before a NextFest, and that article then led to about 3 or 4 additional articles being written from various sites, and those articles, and that's the only kind of outreach we did within that like 2-day period, because we were saving influencers for the actual festival itself, and those articles alone drove around 70,000 wish lists for that game. That's not going to happen for every game, so it is kind of obviously dependent on the game and genre and things like that. And there are games that are inherently more suited to press, and there are genres that are inherently more suited to the medium of the written word versus influencers as well, because obviously you've got to consider your target audience and figure out like, oh, well, if my target audience is generally older, then probably they are going to be reading PC Gamer and Rock Paper Shotgun, whereas if my target audience is much younger, the likelihood of them reading articles for extended periods of time is probably very, very low. So, obviously it is audience dependent, but if your game fits and is a good fit for press and your target audience is there, it can still move the needle in a very big way. Advertising is something that kind of gets a lot of stick, especially for PC titles. Advertising really works. It's very dependent on essentially a collection of variables working together in tandem and all hitting the mark for it to work effectively. It is very easy. The difficulty with advertising, I would say, is one of those things that because it's so accessible and it's very easy to just set up a Facebook ads account, go into Meta and start running ads, that people think that, oh, I can do it, it's no problem. But it's actually way more complex than that. And the tools themselves often don't lend well to people who don't know what they're doing or are unfamiliar with the best strategies to put in place on advertising. So you can actually go in and spend a good chunk of money and get nothing from it. But advertising does work, especially if you know what you're doing and it is conducive to your target audience. So the first kind of big variable here is audience targeting. So that includes like similar game genres, demographics, things like geolocation matters, device targeting matters. So obviously if you are, let's say you're doing a 4x strategy on PC, probably don't target mobile users that are under, let's say 25, right? Because you're not going to go anywhere with that. So all of those type of things matters. Then you've also got to have the creative side locked down as well. So you have to make sure that the creatives themselves hook people in, they're clear. You have to have the time and budget to actually A/B test these things as well. So you have to run campaigns where you're testing different creatives and different ad copy against each other to see what's performing better. You also have to really clearly understand your audience. So advertising is one of those things where it's not as simple as like, here's a screenshot of my game, here's what my game is, now go play it and go click it. That's not how ads work. Ads have to have a emotional component to it. You have to kind of pull people in because one, you have to overcome people's inherent ad filter, which is very more prevalent today than it ever has been, which is like, you're scrolling through, let's say, a social media feed, what a sponsored ad looks like, and oftentimes you just kind of scroll past it. You don't even care what it is. You just know what it looks like, the format, and you just move on. So you have to design ads that don't feel like ads. You have to design ads that pull at the core motivations of your player base. So think about what is it that they get out of their games in that genre, what are the type of things that they're looking for, where are they consuming their content. So where are the places that you should advertise? If you're targeting, let's say, 35 to 55-year-olds, Snapchat ain't the place to go for that. It's going to be, traditional Facebook and Reddit and places like that. So you've got all of those things you've got to consider when formulating your advertising strategy. And it's very important to A/B test, do mini campaigns several weeks in advance, and then really look at your numbers, look at the ROI. Is it working for you? Is it driving traffic? Is it driving wish lists? Or is it mostly just kind of driving clicks, but not really doing anything on the conversion end? And then you've got to assess, well, is that because the traffic is poor quality? Is that because the Steam page isn't right, so the lower funnel isn't converting well? And really kind of test that out. But again, it's one of those options where if you have the budget for it, it can work very, very well and can be very scalable. But if you don't have the budget for it, I would tend to avoid it, because it's one of those things where you really have to know what you're doing. You have to have a clear plan and a clear strategy going in. So, very situational, but worth it if you can do it and you know how. When it comes to influencers, so there's two buckets essentially. There's what we call earned influencers, which are basically influencers that play the game for free, and there's paid influencers, which says free there because I made a typo, so that's awesome. On the free earned influencer side, outreach to YouTubers early when in NextFest, so several days in advance at least. Sometimes if you've got the demo ready, sooner, give them, as you would with press, exclusive access via Steam key or something like that. Allow them the time to actually play the game, record the footage, put the video together, because video production, especially for dedicated YouTubers, it isn't quick. And so the more time that you can give them to actually have time with the game and then make content that they're comfortable putting out there, the better. When it comes to streamers, you can kind of do that a little bit more closer to the actual event itself, especially where if you want live streamers on day one. I would say a couple of days in advance is more than enough. Make sure that you're targeting your influencers carefully. So make sure that the game fits the type of content that they're doing, the type of games that they play, and outreach to them thoughtfully, right? You are talking to another human, so try not to make it sound like a robo email. I oftentimes will watch a creator, watch a video or two of theirs, pick out something that I liked in their video and say, hey, I saw this video. This was really funny, made me laugh. Wondered if you'd take a look at this game because I think you'd really like it because of this reason, or whatever it may be. Particularly with influencers as well, one key, common mistake I see being made is that people ask if they're interested. Don't do that. There's a couple of reasons why, but the main one is that they're busy. And if you consider, let's say a popular influencer, they're probably getting hundreds of emails a day asking if they're interested in a particular game, and for people to try their game. Send them the key or send them the access to the demo in the initial email so that they can just read the email and then go play the game. The more kind of hurdles you put up and barriers to entry you put up, the less influencers you'll get. So just give them the access and say, hey, thought you might be interested in this. Here's a key to the game. Would love it if you tried it. Please enjoy. And if you need anything or have any questions, just let me know. That's the kind of outreach that works best for influencers because they just want to get into it. The first thing that they're likely to do when thinking about whether they should try a game is they're going to look at the Steam page. They're going to look at the trailer. They're going to have a glance through the Steam page. So make sure to include a link in to the Steam page in the email. Make sure to include your press kit and make sure to include access to the game, whether that's a Steam key or just a link to the demo on either Steam or wherever it's currently located. If you're not using an agency and you're doing DIY, one of the things that people often ask me about, is it worth using Keymailer or Lurkit or any kind of tool to distribute keys and outreach to influencers. My recommendation is like they can be very, very helpful depending on like making sure that they're running well and they're verifying their influencers and stuff like that. But they're not perfect also, and there's no software or tool that's perfect. So don't over rely on those tools. I would the kind of best way to do it if you're doing DIY is do a combination of outreach for influencers. So do some key mailer stuff or lurkit stuff, but also combine it with authentic email outreach. So to save on time, for example, let's say you build a list and you're like, here are the 10 creators that I must have for this game because they're perfect and they're going to love it. And these are the ones that really move the needle for this genre. Email those guys, those 10, 15, and then do everybody else on Keymailer or Lurkwit or something like that to save you time and energy. And that way you get the kind of the best of both, right? If you are lucky enough to have budget for paid influencers, then obviously paid influencers can be a really useful tool, both in terms of ROI and content, but things like you can use their live streams for running it on your store page during NextFest, things like that. There's a couple of points that I would make about paid influencers, though. One is that they can be expensive, so just be careful with that because those budgets can balloon very quickly. And the other is think about the sponsorship and why you're doing it. So don't just pay to play, have them play for 2 hours. Think about fun content, collaborative content. Think about like, is there something, a type of a video that they've done in the past that you'd like to see? Like, for example, with a survival game that I put in the image here, I spent 100 days in Raft. And so is there something that's really fun and entertaining for the audience that will generate good ROI? Don't just be like, hey, here's a few $1,000s to play 10 minutes of my game on stream. So yeah, make sure to put the time and effort into that. During the NextFest itself, drive community engagement. So, run live streams, play Q&As through the forums and live stream, engage on Discord, engage on Steam forums, treat customers with respect and understanding. Don't be emotional in responses, just be thankful and appreciative. Comes across way better. One important thing is that because NextFest changes every time, the feature tags or the feature placements on NextFest, the kind of the buckets that they put in, they change every single NextFest. If you find yourself in a position where you're not in that many feature spots because of the tags on your Steam page that you've chosen, don't be afraid to change them up on the day of. So if you need to, be active and agile in that sense. So if, let's say you've got a turn-based RPG and turn-based isn't being featured, but maybe you don't, JRPG or something is, and you don't have that tag, go put that tag on, change your tags up based on what's being presented and offered in NextFest. It's a really good way to do it. And don't be afraid to try new things. Drop new content, do a funny video. Don't just do what others have done and what strategies are well known. Try and have fun, and don't try something unique and try and be creative and unique. One example of this is what we did is where we launched a demo that was 40 hours in length for a game, and that went really well with the press, and we got a bunch of headlines and it drove a lot of traffic. Try and think of fun things to do, both in terms of marketing beats and content that you can do during and pre-NextFest, so that you gain yourself a bit of attention, especially if you've got something really unique about the game that you want to showcase. In terms of post NextFest, so once NextFest is over, make sure to actually carry that momentum into something. Keep the momentum going. So blog posts, do a NextFest roundup post, thanking people for their feedback, all of that kind of thing. If there are present influencers who didn't get a chance to play the game, doing another round of outreach, saying, hey, the demo's still available if you'd like to play it and you've got a bit more time now. it's a good time to do that. And if you are going to use NextFest as a launch catalyst, time it close enough so that it doesn't just kind of fizz out. Make sure you get onto that release date announcement, or are you going to do a new trailer, or is there going to be a demo update? Keep your demo live. Like, don't just take the demo down. I mean, obviously in certain cases, if you've got like an online multiplayer and you're paying thousands of dollars for servers, then maybe take your demo down if you have to, but keep your demo up, update it, and keep the momentum and communication up. Don't just go back into isolation and not talk to your community that you've built within that time frame. Some common pitfalls that I see in NextFest. One is buggy demo. So, QA is incredibly important. Lack of engagement. Obviously, some people are shyer than others. Put on a mask, get somebody else to do it, but engage as much as you possibly can during the NextFest with players. It's incredibly important and sends a really good signal to players and boosts their confidence in the product itself. Make sure you plan and make sure that you put time, money, and energy into it. Even if you're on a limited budget, like, put whatever you can into NextFest, because it's an incredibly important beat. And trying to do everything possible is really important. If nothing is working, don't panic. Look for feedback, reassess your messaging, reassess your visual identity, reassess the store page, make changes as you need to, try new things. If things aren't working, nothing bad's going to happen from trying something new, because the bar's pretty low, right? So it can only help. Make sure that you follow up post NextFest, keep the momentum going, and don't go back into isolation. So if you've started to build a community and there's players interacting with you on the forums, or players have joined your Discord, don't just then go silent. You've got to keep that communication going and making sure that people, are really engaged and moving towards the next thing. Key takeaways: choose the right NextFest, plan early, dedicate time, money, and energy, QA the crap out of your demo, begin your campaign before the fest, 2 to 3 weeks before, in terms of actual outreach, but in terms of prep, 3 to 6 months before. Create an integrated marketing approach, which is basically means like multi-channel. So use different, don't just rely on press, don't just rely on influencers, don't just rely on advertising. Do everything across the board, unify it, and spread your awareness out, and create a situation where the area or surface of opportunity is much higher for something good to happen. Be engaged, be agile. Don't be afraid to, be flexible and move, change things on the fly if you need to, and make sure you follow up after the NextFest. And that's basically the secrets, or not so secrets, of NextFest in a nutshell.
Nicely done. Very good job. Now, you have a lot of questions. So for everyone out there, if you put a question in, I've been marking them, so we're going to go through them. We're going to get as many in as we can in the next 10 minutes. But if we don't get to your question, then just go over to the Discord. It's discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. We have an entire section of the Discord set aside for this deep dive. And Michael's over there. We'll follow up and answer all the questions that we miss when we're there. So first off, from YouTube, I've heard some developers and agencies starting to say that making a NextFest close to the launch is not the best option anymore. What do you think?
I don't agree. I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds like a cop-out, but it is somewhat situational. But I would more often than not say that close to launch is better, because the further away from launch that you do your NextFest, the less likely those wish lists are to convert. And also it means that, like, it depends on your overall marketing strategy as well, but the more that you can keep those people who find the game engaged, the better. So, I would say that, like, it really depends on how it falls within your overall marketing strategy, and obviously what genre and game that you're making. But I still maintain, based on the data that we have, and we do, on average, we do about 5 or 6 games per NextFest. Based on the data that we have, we've seen that the closer it is to launch, the better. But it is, I will say though, that it kind of depends on the NextFest. So traditionally for indies specifically, February is better, especially if you're launching right after. February is better than October for indies. So it really also depends on your launch timing as well.
Well, that actually cues in perfectly to the next question. Do you have any specific data to show the busiest NextFest period by games participating?
If you're talking about like how many games, every NextFest is incredibly busy now. So like usually on average, I think the last one was like 1,300 or more games are participating per NextFest. So it is very, very competitive. October tends to be a little bit more heavy with like the big budget titles because they're launching usually very shortly after. The Summer Festival is also, I mean, there's big, but I mean, look, the reality is now there's big budget titles everywhere, which way you look. There's, the days of like, hey, launch in this period for if you're an indie are gone. But like summer NextFest is busy for competitive titles, but it is actually a good time to potentially gain some traction, especially if you're launching in like the July August period. Can be a really good time to gain a lot of traction there. But I always recommend if you're launching in like Q1, so if you're launching like February, March, April, then February is probably your best shot on that one.
All right, from Plutonium Powered on YouTube, we made the mistake of entering NextFest when our demo was unfinished and buggy, so we removed our demo. We're planning to release in 2 months. Is it worth it now to make a new demo?
Yeah, I would say so. So data suggests that what we're looking at is like it's actually gone into a weird cycle because it used to be that like demos were good and then they weren't good and now they're good again. So like actually having a demo, even having a demo being live when the game is out is actually consistently beneficial for conversion. And it actually adds a confidence perception to the game because if I'm selling you something and I'm like, hey, try it first before you buy it. If you don't believe me, try it. It looks really good. And so it actually does help your conversion on sales as well. So I would definitely recommend doing another demo and try and make a big thing out of it. Try and push influencers, try and push press, and make it into its own marketing beat.
From Hex, in our vertical slice, the first 30 minutes are carefully crafted to teach the game at a fun pace. The next several hours are the game itself. Should we use this as a demo?
It depends on how long you want your demo to be. My advice, so there's a couple of case studies where I've actually had the developers craft an entirely unique demo that's representative of the game, but actually not the game itself. So almost like a prologue because of a similar issue where like it takes too long to get into the game and there's so many different like levels to like different systems, that kind of thing. So really it comes down to what you think. I mean, you have to grab them very quickly. So, if it's a game where there's a lot of build up, my suggestion would be either craft something that's unique, like a prologue or something like that you can use as your demo that people can get into quickly, or provide a situation where it's action heavy from maybe a narrative situation or something like that where players are engaged within the first couple of minutes, then move to the tutorial. But if your tutorial is like 30 minutes long, then maybe make sure that your demo is maybe like an hour or two. But you've one of the things that you could do is test it out and just make the demo first, ask a couple of people to play it, try it out, and then get the feedback and assess based on that.
Does the conversion rate from Steam to NextFest seem to be higher than any other event?
It depends on what you mean. If you mean wishlist conversion in terms of gaining wish lists, it's kind of variable depending on the game. I would say that on average, I would say that especially if you're featured and you've got really good visibility during the Steam NextFest, I would say that it is higher than most other events, mainly because Valve, obviously it's their events, they promote it more in platform, whereas like a lot of external events now, don't get front page featuring anymore. And like I said, it goes back to the intent situation. Whereas, like, let's say if you do, let's say you do PAX, and PAX do an event page on Steam, people aren't going there. People might click on it and have a browse, but there's not the same amount of people who are high in intent of looking for new stuff to try. So NextFest is kind of unique in that sense. And so on average, yes.
As always, it depends. From Leonardo on YouTube, how many wish lists do you recommend having before you enter NextFest?
Sure. So in terms of the pre-build-up momentum, it can differ, but I always recommend. So we've aimed internally right now for anywhere between 25,000 and 35,000 wish lists in the kind of couple of days, in the kind of let's say the week periods prior. So we're trying to gain around that amount of wish lists before day one. And then day one, we're usually aiming, if we want a top placement, like if we want to be in a top 10, we're aiming for anywhere between like 15 to 25,000 wish lists on day one. So it's not easy. It's like a big barrier there, but like, obviously as many as possible in an ideal world. But like that's kind of, sharing secrets for you there. But that's kind of what we're kind of aiming. Those are our kind of goalposts internally for, especially the games that we're trying to get to those like top 10 placements.
All right. So cringeworthy question on Twitch. If I'm already behind the 8-ball, meaning that I'm enrolled in June NextFest and my demo and Steam page and marketing all need work, what is your best recommendation for focus? I'm guessing the demo. I'm a solo dev.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can always pull out if you need to, and go into the next one. But if you committed to June and you're definitely thinking on doing it, then I would say demo is your priority, and then Steam page is priority number 2. Those two things are a minimum, because obviously those are the two things that are going to be the biggest impact on your conversion from people coming into the NextFest on Steam platform. And then external marketing is your third, if we're talking about like bare minimum.
What news or forums do you recommend to promote your game before NextFest?
It can depend on the genre, right? So if like I'm doing an RPG, I'll go find like really niche subreddits, and I'll go find like forums on like RPG Gamer or on Maxroll or somewhere like that. If it's it really depends on the genre. So if there's specific places where people gather and the audience gathers for those type of games, then I'll go search them out. So a couple of hours research, and you should be able to come up with some good spots. And then don't be afraid to do something like maybe do a Reddit post where you're on a forum where you're like, hey, I'm a developer, this is our story, here's our game, and then maybe use $1,000 or $2 to boost that post on a particular subreddit, things like that. So it's kind of, the strategy is dependent on the game, but it's really, I always aim for where the audience is, regardless of anything else.
All right, last one, and you need to make it short. But so, this involves your demo that you sent out. The demo that you sent to press and influencer prior to NextFest, should that be also available to everybody, or do you have to wait to NextFest to make it public?
You don't have to wait to NextFest, and I recommend that you don't. I usually give the demo, I usually give the press and influencers access to the demo before it's public. Then I make the game public, and then NextFest happens. So I usually launch the game, the demo publicly, maybe like 3 to 7 days before the NextFest, but I give influencers and press access several days before that.
Awesome. Michael, thank you as always. Everybody else, we're going to wrap this one up, and then we'll be right back with our next talk. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.